We are going live. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. And we are recording as well. It is May 13th of 2020. I'm Dr. Jay Davidson with Microbe Formulas. The co-host, co-founder is on some much needed rest and recuperation, Dr. Todd Watts, so he will not be joining us today. I've got a special presentation on iodine that I've put together for all y'all, so we'll be getting started in just a minute. Love to hear where everybody is coming from. I see Arizona, Canada. Lisa says hi, Indiana. Amanda's in the house as always. Cleveland, Florida, Kentucky, Maui, Cape Cod, Buffalo, NorCal, Tennessee, Milwaukee, Minnesota, the Twin Cities, UK, Illinois, Montana, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Nebraska, Kansas City, Colorado. Oh, so great to see everybody getting on while all this chaos in the world is still going on. Just a couple quick updates. If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get to many questions today. I've got a lot of information I want to go through on iodine, and I'm a little nervous I might run out of time. So if you want to just more use the chat, just interact, but I'm pretty much driving and driving the bus by myself. So I don't know how much of the chat I'll be able to pick up while I'm doing presentation here on iodine, but I look through some of my notes from the first book that I wrote back in 2014, 2015, and I started looking at the iodine notes and just had this feeling of, wow, I need to update this. So I've been head down in research pretty hardcore. Been up early this morning, got up at 5 a.m. am intermittent fasting. It's 3 p.m. where I'm at, Eastern time. And brain is firing and functioning all cylinders. Took some iodine this morning. So just love learning and bringing y'all the most cutting edge information. If you're not on our Facebook group, you can join that, microbeformulasgroup.com. And as always, we're just really thankful for you to be on the live with the docs every week. It's the same Zoom link, same time, and also the replay will get up, but we always have specials, giveaways for those that attend live, and we'll have a super special surprise at the end of today as well. But getting in and getting this launched here, I would love, as we're going to cover what I would consider an iodine masterclass, is you'll see a poll popping up on your screen. Do you take iodine as a supplement right now? Yes or no? Pretty simple question. Just click one. If you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote, just click yes or no. Love to get some feedback on if you take iodine supplement currently, just to get a better feel for the audience. Looks like 70% has voted so far. Do you take an iodine supplement currently, right now? So just a few more seconds. Let's get up to at least 80%. I see you still like, I don't need to answer. He's not talking to me. I'm talking to you. Let's get up to 80% here. Do you take an iodine supplement? All right, pretty close. So let's share the results. What do we got? 64% yes, 36% no. Okay, great to hear and see. And for those that did not see the question pop up, sometimes it's on an iPad or an iPhone or tablet or a phone, and sometimes you got to shift the screen over one side or the other. So if you didn't see it, no worries. Just wanted to try to get a good take on what's going on in the iodine world. So let me share my screen and get into this info. And just in the chat, if you can see my screen, it should say summary, should be the full screen. Let me know, just say yes. For those that are on a tablet or a phone and you're still seeing my face, a lot of times you can slide the screen over and you'll get to the full screen slides. I'd recommend seeing the slides. If you want to see my face, that's fine too. But usually when you're on a computer, you can see both. Yes, perfect. Okay. Thank y'all so much. So I'm going to just close the chat right now because it's going to be too hard to drive and text at the same time. So I'm just going to drive the bus and let y'all know what's going on. So let's go to the summary here. You are most likely deficient. This is the summary of what I'm going to be presenting here for the next hour. You're most likely deficient of iodine unless you are supplementing with it. Standard dosing, I believe, is way too low, and I'm going to show you evidence on why I believe that. New higher dosing standards, I believe, need to be set back to more similar to what they were in the early 1900s and 1930s. And obviously today's common dosing is way too small. You should not get your iodine intake from salt. Iodine is a marathon nutrient, not a quick sprint. So those are the summary items to get to. Now, as we look at the water supply impacts iodine in our body pretty significantly, but chlorine is in the water supply. And according to the EPA, chlorine is added to the city water supplies in order to protect public drinking water from disease-carrying organisms and pathogens. You've got all kinds of things like typhoid, cholera, dysentery, giardia, and other types of microbial pathogens as well in the water, but the cryptosporidium is actually quite resistant to chlorine. So chlorine's not getting everything, but it is in standard for our municipal tap water because of the whole pathogen thing. Likewise, though, chlorine kills good bacteria in the GI tract and reacts with other naturally occurring materials to form carcinogenic byproducts such as trihalomethanes and haloacetic acetate acids. Now, the thing to understand is when you combine tap water with heat and basically react these chemicals with what's typically in standard dishwashing detergent cleaners in your dishwasher, is typically you're putting out a lot of these like trihalomethanes and stuff into your air. So if you do run a dishwasher, it's good to get more of a natural type soap to put in there. And if you're able to have any type of filtration whole house, it's more of a rarity. So the best thing to do is just anytime you run the dishwasher, just make sure you don't turn the heat on, because that usually creates more of the chemicals, but just have the windows open or running it when you sleep so you're not really breathing so much of this in. Hopefully it dissipates, or just hand wash. But there is a consideration with the chlorine in water. Now, fluoride is commonly added to our water supply and unfortunately has nothing to do with actually treating the water. It's added essentially as a pharmaceutical drug. While fluoride is a naturally occurring element, calcium fluoride, the fluoride that's added to our water supply is not. It's actually typically a byproduct of the fertilizer industry, and there's different types of compounds that city waters will purchase: sodium silicofluoride, hydrofluorosilicic acid, or sodium fluoride. Now, the thing to understand about when they get delivery of this quote unquote fluoride, the bins say that they're actually hazardous. And then yet they're putting them in at microscopic amounts in our water supply because it's going to help us with our bodies, supposedly. Well, the whole idea of this came from some flawed research in 1940 that showed that fluoride applied topically to your teeth was a benefit to people. There's a big difference, though, between applying fluoride topically versus drinking it systemically in small amounts constantly. Research shows that fluoride is toxic. It's actually a reactive element that damages body tissues, particularly the nervous system, after continuous exposure. Fluoride induces changes in the cerebral morphology and biochemistry, which affect the neurological development of our individuals, of us, and our brain processes. That's what cognitive means, such as memory and learning. And the effects of fluoride toxicity are not immediate. This is the thing. Oh, it's not affecting me. No, it's more of the longer term. And you'll notice I try to grab all the research journal articles and throw that at the bottom. So if you're Dean Burke, medical doctor of the U.S. National Cancer Institute, said fluoride causes more human cancer than any other chemical. So what's in our water supply? Not only do we have chlorine and fluoride, but research has shown that pretty much everything in the medicine cabinet has also been found in our water supply as well. So we're not only getting the halogens, but we're also getting cholesterol medication, hormones, all kinds of stuff that pharmaceutical people are taking. So think about it. Somebody's taking medicines and then they're urinating them out, and the urine is going into the city water and it's getting cleaned up. That stuff's not really getting filtered. It's going back, you're drinking it, And then, of course, I mean, there are people that dump prescription drugs down the toilet as well to dispose of it, which I would recommend against doing that, but people do it. So going into the chemistry side, and don't hold on before I lose you here. We're looking at the periodic table of elements. While this might have brought nightmares, there is some relevance to it. So we're going to zoom in a little bit and look at that second to right column, and that is the halogen column. So you'll see atomic weight of 9 is fluorine. Then we've got right below that chlorine. Then we've got right below that bromine. And then we've got right below that iodine. So this is the halogen category. Now, halogen is the least reactive of all the halogens. If I didn't say that properly, iodine is the least reactive of all the halogens, and fluorine is actually the most reactive. And it's been shown that increased exposure to fluorine, chlorine, and bromine all will displace healthy iodine from the body. So those are some big takeaways as we're looking at this. Now, iodine is a micronutrient. Micronutrient, oftentimes they're referring to our vitamins and minerals. In this case, iodine is a essential mineral. It's an essential mineral. It's a trace element. Iodine's not produced by the body. That's why they call it essential, meaning you have to consume it in diet typically or supplementation. It was actually discovered back in 1811, 1829, Dr. Lugol, and Lugol's is a popular name because it was this guy back in the early 1800s discovered the right ratio of iodine to iodide. Now, when we're looking at iodide, it's the salt form of iodine, but the ratio is 5 milligrams of iodine to 7.5 milligrams of iodide. So that's the Lugol's ratio. It's classically 12.5 milligrams. Now, iodine, not the salt form, but iodine will diffuse into the cell. So it doesn't need to be transported. It'll just basically diffuse or float right into the cell. Iodide, though, the salt form of iodine, needs to be transported into the cell. And different tissues in your body absorb one or the other, or actually have a preference for it, which is why there's a need for both. So the preferences for different forms of iodine, the thyroid gland prefers typically in some mouse studies. And again, this is what research is showing up into this point. In 5 or 10 years, could we understand things better? Hopefully, right? Hopefully we continue to get clarity, but up until this point, in a study, they found that the rodents responded best on iodide when we're looking actually for thyroid. On the flip side, though, when we're looking at breast tissue and the pituitary gland, which is in the brain area, and it's a big part of the hypothalamus pituitary axis of hormones in the body, it actually preferred iodine. So iodine was actually the preferred form of iodine in the tissue. And then the prostate really depended on. They said that if a cell is cancerous, then it responded best to iodine. Normal healthy, though, would be iodide. So there, you can see there's a need for both types of iodine and iodide. Now, not to get too far in the weeds, but I just didn't want to leave anything off the table. So I've got a lot of research in here and just some things. If you're like, do I really need to memorize that? I'm going to bring it all back. I'm going to summarize this and make sense of it. But essentially, there's different types of iodine in nature. And this is just giving you a snippet. Basically, the ocean, they're the largest suppositories or the repositories of iodine. And it's in the form of iodide. So you see seawater is iodide. And basically what happens is that gets evaporated, brought up in the form of iodine that then's dropped over the soil, and then the whole process of iodine in the soil happens. It's really slow, though, and not super efficient. So a lot of the soil is iodine deficient, especially farther away from the ocean. So as we look at areas like the Great Lakes, the Midwest, very iodine deficient areas of soil. So it really depends on where your food is coming from too, and the farming practices. But for the most part, there's not really much iodine at all in food other than sea vegetables. So let's look at what inhibits iodide absorption. So I mentioned that, and I won't go too much into this, but essentially iodine diffuses into the cell. Iodide needs a transporter. So it's been shown in research that fluoride will actually inhibit the sodium iodide symporter, or the transporter that brings the iodide into the cell. So again, another reason that we don't want fluoride exposure. Now, really the simple thing to understand is that fluoride competes with iodine. Bromine competes with iodine. Chlorine competes with iodine. And we used to get iodine everywhere. This is really interesting to learn about this, is that America was much more conscious about getting iodine, especially early on in the 1900s. By the 1950s, there were thousands of products that contained iodine, such as bread, salt, milk, supplements, and even antiperspirants. They don't add iodine to bread or milk anymore, and we're now being told to decrease our salt in our diet. And the iodine they actually add to the salt is synthetic, which is not great. So you see a picture there, povidone, that is what was used as a disinfectant of the skin and to prevent or treat infections on the skin. So it's more of a topical cleansing thing. They would oftentimes use it before surgery and different types of procedures like that. That's, for the most part, my understanding is that's kind of been pushed off and not used too much, but iodine was used for that. So kind of cool to know that. So going back to the periodic table of elements, just to click this in, is iodine is a halogen. It's in the same group as chlorine, fluorine, and bromine. And an increased exposure to these atoms displaces our healthy iodine. So we have an issue of we're not getting enough iodine, first of all, in our diet and supplementation frequently. But the other problem is we're getting exposed to chlorine, fluorine, and that's displacing even more, even what we have of iodine out of the body. Now, the opposite is also true. So iodine actually prevents chlorine, fluorine, and bromine from entering the body. And big pharma's known this. I think that's why there's kind of been this underlying agenda since, you know, the 60s and 50s, kind of when it peaked of iodine, to get rid of it, because they essentially attach one of these molecules, usually fluorine, to a pharmaceutical to help it be delivered. And so the pharmaceutical companies understand that if you have a lot of iodine in your body, it's harder for these drugs to get absorbed and go into the body to do what they're supposed to do, because the iodine is essentially competing. So having low iodine allows these other halogens, which are not beneficial to the body, that they'll, you know, attach to a molecule, a medicine like Prozac. You can see Flonase, Lipitor. They're all drugs that are actually using fluorine to attach to. And then this article, I found this in Chemistry Journal 2019. It says, over the last 2 decades, fluorine substitution has become one of the most essential structural traits in modern pharmaceuticals. Thus, about half of the most successful drugs, blockbuster drugs, contain fluorine atoms. Let that sink in. About half the amount of drugs contain where the drug is attached to a fluorine molecule. And what's that going to do? It's going to kick out iodine from your body. So iodine is depleted by prescription drugs. It's depleted by plastics, which is the endocrine disrupting chemical category. It's depleted by pesticides. There's been research I just showed, or I just saw, and I didn't put it in the slides, but showing that pesticide exposure will decrease iodine absorption, and it's also been linked with autism as well too. Unfiltered tap water, you're getting chlorine and fluoride in the water supply, is going to deplete iodine. Remember, the more you consume chlorine and fluoride, the more we're going to kick out the iodine in the body. Soft drinks, you'll see ingredients such as brominated vegetable oil, exposure to new electronics, a lot of the brominated flame retardants. A lot of the flame retardants have bromine in them. And then even consumption of baked goods, and I'll get to that in just a second, what that means. So this is a lot of stuff on the slide. Essentially, just understand that all endocrine disrupting chemicals will impact our thyroid and our iodine amounts in the body. So what are some common endocrine disrupting chemicals? We've got BPA, dioxins, perchlorate. We've got the PFASs, which essentially are the non-stick pans. We have phthalates. And again, this will be up as a recording. So if you want to come back to this, feel free. If you want to screenshot things, feel free as well too, but the recording will be up so you can go back and see all this. Also continuing on, some other common endocrine disruptors are phytoestrogens, commonly found in soy products, PBDA, which are in the flame retardant category. So this is the polybrominated diphenyl ethers. And then we got PCBs as well. That's a chlorine type derivative. And then we have triclosan. That is an antibacterial, that's like in soap and whatnot. That's real toxic to the body. But essentially, they're all endocrine disrupting chemicals, and they're going to impact our thyroid, and they're going to negatively influence how much iodine we get into the body. So these are just showing you some examples of where flame retardants can be found. And there's some good documentaries I've seen over the years, kind of exposing the flame retardants, how, they're designed so that they don't start on fire if your house catches on fire. But what I've seen over the years in some documentaries was that it actually makes the fire burn hotter and more dangerous when it gets going. So I don't think flame retardants are the way to go. I hope we learn this and change it at some point. But couches, electronics, your new iPad or your new MacBook will have typically flame retardants on it. Foam baby items, carpet padding, kitchen appliances, all this come with it. And there's over 175 different types of flame retardants. They're generally divided into different classes. Brominated is one category that I was talking about, chlorinated, phosphorus containing or nitrogen containing, or you have inorganic flame retardants. Those are the typical five categories that they'll kind of break that up into. But coming back to when I talked about baked goods just a couple slides ago, it's like, what do you mean baked goods? Well, they used to have iodine in flour. And now when you look at ingredients, if it's listed, when it says bleached wheat flour, and then they, add back stuff to it, because essentially what happens is when you bleach wheat flour and turn it into white flour, it becomes an anti-nutrient. So in order for it to be legal, they have to add nutrients back into it. And all those are synthetic and they're just garbage anyways. But what's interesting is they're enriching this bleach flour with brominated. It's bromine. So there's bromine in the base flour of these wheat flours and certain flours. So you got to check it out. If you're a baker and cooking, you don't want bromine added in on it. So continuing the bromine side of it, and some of these slides, there's just a ton of references at the bottom, but I tried to pinch them all in. I think the next slide's even worse if I can remember. But bromine or bromide can displace iodide in the thyroid and increase its excretion via your kidneys. This is particularly true if you don't consume enough iodine and are exposed to a lot of bromine. So again, bromine is a halogen. You're exposed to that, you're going to lose iodine. It's going to compete for iodine, and we don't want that. You can be exposed by bromine by touching, breathing, or even ingesting it. So I often wonder with those that are like bakers and cooking, the donut and bakery type things, why a lot of those people struggle with so much health. Gluten, I feel like, is an issue, but I also believe the bromine can also be a piece of that too, that you're actually inhaling it. So here's some exposures just to bromine, lots of stuff. Like I said, the flour, you've got soda, different dyes that can be in cosmetics and actually tattoo ink, farming chemicals, fertilizers, flame retardants, which I mentioned, which of course are going to come on new electronics as well. Rubber products such as tires, that's really interesting. Seawater and seafood. So seawater has iodide in it, but because of the contamination and the pollution in the world, there is bromine all over in the ocean. So obviously that is in our water supply, unfortunately. It's really been a pollutant that's affected a lot of people. Some prescription nasal sprays and inhalers. I talked about fluorine being in the prescription side, but bromine also is used, and then even used sometimes in water disinfectants in pools and hot tubs. Now, some of the bromines being phased out very slowly in certain categories because it's been shown to rip apart the ozone layer, but for the most part, it's still there. If you're wondering about the EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and if you're just tuning in, I'm doing an iodine masterclass. So it's all about iodine. Lots of information. I just want to make sure I get through it. And then hopefully I can check the chat after I'm done and questions if there is any extra time. But cell phone radiation decreased the size of thyroid and decreased the uptake of iodine by the thyroid. So the electromagnetic fields or the electromagnetic radiation that a cell phone's given off will actually shrink your thyroid, which you don't want, and it'll actually decrease the uptake of iodine in the thyroid. So more research on the dangers of EMF and how that plays a role in iodine and thyroid. Now, the USA is deficient in iodine, and I'm going to show you the world really is. But the US dietary iodine intakes have decreased drastically since the 70s. There's been an agenda to really get iodine out, which is why you see a lot of newer research talking about this really small dose of iodine. It's like, what happened to back in the 30s when we were taking tons of it and people were doing great? And then obviously there was a big shift. In this research, though, they said that since the 70s, with iodine deficiency reemerging in vulnerable groups such as women of reproductive age, but the majority of these articles that they reviewed demonstrated an emergent iodine deficiency in this population of women of reproductive age, indicating an alarm for a public health concern needing immediate action. And I wouldn't just limit it to women of reproductive age. I'm going to say there's been research on infants and babies and adults just being massively deficient of iodine. So this research was out of Lancet in 2008. They said that 2 billion individuals worldwide had insufficient iodine intake. And I'm going to guess that it's probably higher than that, but according to their standards, 2 billion. Iodine deficiency has many adverse effects on growth and development. These effects are due to inadequate production of thyroid hormone and are termed iodine deficiency disorders. Iodine deficiency is the most common cause of preventable mental impairment worldwide. Now, there is a call to eliminate iodine deficiency. So there was some published research. They had some commentary going back and forth on the research or the journals. And it says a commentary accompanying research calls for greater public health policies to eradicate iodine deficiency in the UK and other developed countries, including the United States. This was the Lancet in 2013 when they were talking about that. So 7 years ago, and it's still an issue that's going on. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit because you might be saying, well, I'm getting, that's why I put table salt on my food. I'm getting enough iodine in my salt. And there's a couple issues with this. So let's go through this. And sorry if there's a lot of information on the slides. I just want to make sure you have all the research right in front of you. So it's not just my opinion on what I'm going through, but salt is not a good source of iodine. If you don't eat sea vegetables, typically your only source of iodine nowadays then is table salt. And the iodine in table salt is synthetic, and the body doesn't like it. It is processed, it is synthetic. We need more natural forms that the body can utilize. Now, natural salt contains a small amount of iodine, but it is quite a bit less. I might still have a slide in here. In case I didn't, typically we're looking at a little bit greater than 30 parts per million of iodine in table salt. Natural salt has less than 15 parts per million as well. Just in case that it end up in my final version of slides. But the issue now too is they're saying that we're consuming too much salt. We're consuming too much sodium. So now we're reducing our intake of salt that's iodized. And I'm saying iodized salt is not good, but this is what's happening. Understand that typically the amount of sodium we're consuming, only 15% is actually coming from table salt. So the vast majority is coming from restaurants and processed foods. And these manufacturers typically do not use iodized salt because it messes with the flavor, they say. So most foods, processed foods, which is not good for you, but most processed foods is not actually going to have iodine in the salt. So it's pretty much just sodium without the iodine. Now, I found this was really interesting. They said the packaging of iodized salt is very important. So jute bags, if I'm pronouncing that right, and I had to Google what it was, and you can see that's the picture on the slide here, have been used extensively in humid conditions. The salt absorbs moisture. The iodate dissolves and will drip out of the bag if it is porous, and much of the iodine will be lost up to 75% over a period of 9 months. So what does this mean? It's common in practices if they're not using plastic bags to seal up the salt, where any iodine that was actually naturally in salt will disappear anyways. And I'm not saying to put it in plastic bags because now you're getting the whole plastic, microplastics and phthalates and all these kind of things that get absorbed in your salt. But I thought this was interesting. And then this research was on evaporating iodine. There is little iodine in iodized salt, and what is there evaporates rapidly when sitting on the table, leaving nothing to absorb. Very interesting. And then we've got iodized salt does not have enough iodine in it. So this is an article on Science Daily, just going through the American Chemical Society journal article. This is another one here, still deficient despite salt. So this was from 2013. Pregnant women who do not make nearly enough thyroid hormone are nearly 4 times likely to produce autistic children than healthy women. A 2005 CDC University of Kansas study estimated that in the US, where iodine deficiency has been practically eradicated thanks to iodized salt, they're estimating that 1 in 7 Americans are still believed to be deficient. I'm like, how do you eradicate something when you're saying 1 in 7 Americans are deficient? And that's according to their standards, which are way, 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 way too low. Then we have iodine in bread, not enough for pregnant women. So of course they took out in the wheat flour, they took out iodinated flour, and they replaced it with brominated. But now they're saying, oh, you can get iodine that's in the table salt of, bread and stuff. Well, it's obviously it's not enough iodine in the salt that comes in the food. And again, most manufacturers don't use iodized salt to begin with. So probably enough on the salt train, but just to kind of finish this up, this is just laying a little bit of background, and here's my 30 parts per million. I couldn't remember if I left that in. I'm like, I probably did, but just in case. So most of the iodide found in seawater is oxidized to form elemental iodine. Iodine evaporates into the atmosphere and is returned to the soil by rain. The iodine cycle is slow, and the soil and crops are deficient of iodine. Iodide form of iodine, which is naturally present in raw and non-iodized salt, is almost completely and rapidly absorbed in the stomach and duodenum, versus iodized salt, iodated salt, which is widely used in iodization of table salt, is reduced in the gut and then absorbed as iodide. So the synthetic stuff that they're adding to table salt is processed differently than just the natural stuff, basically, and salt is a takeaway. And then organically bound natural iodine is typically digested, and then released iodine is absorbed. So it's hard for iodine to actually get absorbed, especially if you have liquid iodine. It's getting ripped apart in the stomach acid. But we've got some solutions to that, and I'll explain that as we come up here farther on the slides. Hopefully y'all are enjoying this. I'm not able to check the chat because it is too much going on. I want to make sure I get through the slides, but I'll check it here as we get toward the end. And then the iodine content, which I mentioned before, the whole 30 parts per million versus less than 15 more natural salt. So the processed salt has a little bit more, but remember it's synthetic. Body doesn't like it. It's absorbed differently than natural salt. And just remember, pretty much whatever iodine's in natural salt is probably disappearing before you even get to it anyways. But let's talk about RDA. So this is something that you'll see is like, whoa, 3,000% of, my iodine for the day, Dr. J, is this going to be toxic? It's like, let's talk about what RDA actually means. Now, according to the NIH, the RDA stands for Recommended Dietary Allowance. This is the average daily level of intake sufficient to meet the nutrient needs or requirements nearly of all 97 to 98% of healthy individuals often use to plan nutritionally adequate diets for individuals. And I'm going to call bullcrap on that. I think that's a horrible definition. I don't think that's what they're using it for. Here's what I believe, and you don't have to believe this, but this is my belief. RDA is the bare minimum to prevent a goiter. The goiter is the enlargement of the thyroid. So RDA is the bare minimum to prevent a goiter. It is nothing about optimal body function. It is nothing about your body functioning at its optimal. It is just enough to not get a goiter. Well, when you have vitamin C deficiency and it gets so low, something that they say happens is rickets. Well, when you have iodine deficiency that gets so low, eventually you'll get a goiter. It doesn't mean that just enough to prevent a goiter is actually optimal. And that's the big difference. So the US right now, which I think is a really big mistake, the US recommended daily allowance of iodine is only 150 micrograms. This equates to only 0.15 milligrams. So if you take 1 milligram, that means it's 1,000 micrograms, just to give you for a conversion. But just remember, either 0.15 milligrams or 150 micrograms as far as dosing. Now, here's the thing that you'll see all over research. And right, right when I read it, I was like, my BS meter went up. I'm like, I don't think this is right. I don't think so. It says, and they quote all the time in all these journals, iodine is mostly concentrated in the thyroid gland. A healthy adult body contains 15 to 20 milligrams of iodine, 70 to 80% of which is stored in your thyroid gland. And it's like, man, when I've done testing and things on milligram storage of the body, I've gotten way more. I mean, I'm talking like a factor of 50 times more than what they quote unquote show. But as I dug around farther in the literature, I found this and I was like, this is it. This makes a lot of sense. So deficiency versus adequate iodine matters a lot. So this was Endocrine Review in 2009. It was published, and they said in conditions of adequate iodine supply, no more than 10% of absorbed iodine is taken up by the thyroid. So what are they saying? That when you actually have enough iodine, majority of the iodine in your body is not in the thyroid. In chronic iodine deficiency, though, this fraction can exceed 80%. So what is vastly quoted out there in these journals? 70 to 80% of which is stored in your thyroid. Well, what does that mean? That means that somebody is in a chronic iodine deficiency if the vast majority of their iodine is actually stored there. So I suspect, and I'll keep digging for sources on this, but you have to understand there's a lot of corruption in the research world. The editors get lots of money under the table to publish certain things and not with certain slants. And as much as we'd want to just be like, what's evidence-based and what's the research say? You got to sort through some garbage with the good stuff. And really, I always tell people, use your eyes to see, your ears to hear, but use your heart to discern. Research has actually shown that our heart has 40,000 sensory neurites in it. What does that mean? It means that our heart has its own brain cells in it. So if you ask, how many brains does the body have? Well, according to actually looking at it, you hear about the GI tract has its enteric nervous system as kind of the second brain. I would say maybe we have 3 brains. We have our actual head brain, we have our gut brain, what's your gut feeling, but then what's your heart say? The heart, 40,000 sensory neurites in it. Really cool. So your heart obviously has a brain of some kind as well. So cool stuff that you can really find when you dig, but just got to understand there's going to be a lot of garbage. And especially in this iodine world, there's a lot of misconstruing things. So continuing, Japanese consume a lot of iodine. So when you see research and it's like, oh, you're toxic if you consume over 1 milligram or 1,000 micrograms of iodine, it's like, what? That's ridiculous. There's no way, because in this research from 2011, they determined that because of the diet is rich in sea vegetables, the average Japanese adult consumes on average 13.8 milligrams of iodine per day. And remember, the RDA was 150 micrograms or 0.15 milligrams. I mean, just a drastic difference. Then there was some more research. So again, that was from 2011. Now we're looking at 2014 and 2019, and they're finding that the estimated average of iodine intake for somebody from Japan is up to or as high as 20 milligrams of iodine daily. Seaweed intake has been linked with lower risk of premature death from any cause. Also, people in Japan have a lower cancer rate and a low rate of fibrocystic breast disease, and I'll show you why in a moment. So this was published in Thyroid in 2013, and I was like, man, why is this not being more? Why are people not seeing this more? So iodine has an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effect. It actually is immune supportive. With everything that's going on in the world right now, you want to support your immune system. And this, they found, is particularly true when you have doses of iodine at least 3 milligrams, meaning the minimum. And remember, the recommended daily allowance, or the RDA, of iodine is 0.15 milligrams. So in addition to being a component of thyroid hormone, the iodine can be an antioxidant as well as an anti-proliferative and differentiation agent that helps to maintain integrity of several organs with the ability to take up iodine. We propose that the International Council for the Control of Iodine Deficient Disorders recommend that iodine intake be increased to at least 3 milligrams per day. from what it is of 0.15. I mean, look at how big of a difference that they're recommending in this journal. So the case for higher iodine consumption, this is from 2004, 2008. In one study, women with normal thyroid health, but monthly breast pain took 6 grams of iodine daily for 6 months. About 50% of them had a significant reduction in breast pain related to their monthly cycles. Really cool. This was just some more research back in 1993, so it is a little bit older, but still relevant. And they found that iodine helped with fibrocystic breast disease. And then this research I thought was really interesting. If you followed myself or Dr. Todd Watts at all for any length of period, you've probably heard activated charcoal, which is really a spent carbon, versus bioactive carbons and unspent. But I thought this was really cool that this is from 2014, the effect of 8 weeks treatment with oral iodinated activated charcoal. So basically iodine in charcoal of lung function of patients. So they monitored the effect with moderate COPD, was examined in a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled parallel group study with 40 patients. And technically double-blind doesn't exist. If you start looking at quantum physics and the whole double slit experiment and the power of observation, whether atom is actually a wave or a particle, double-blind actually doesn't exist, but some people hold it as that's the gold standard. Anyways, 8 patients in the IAC group developed abnormal thyroid hormone levels transiently during the treatment. So they found that when you take iodine for a very short period, there were some abnormal thyroid hormone levels, which of course the body's trying to adjust. That's why you'll see labs change all over the place at times, especially when you first introduced iodine, but this is a natural process the body's supposed to do. In summary though, this study suggests that iodinated activated charcoal surprisingly and significantly improved lung function of patients with moderate COPD. So real cool. I want to do studies with the bioactive carbon, specifically the extracts of fulvic acid that we have attached to the iodine. But in time, we'll get to that stuff. This is iodine in cancer. Iodine is a vitally important nutrient that is detected in every organ and tissue. Research shows that it induces apoptosis in cancer cells, which is why iodine deficiency is linked to many cancers. Also, the second study here that was 2019, they found that when people were given iodine and then they underwent breast cancer surgery and then were given basically chemo meds afterward, that their 5-year survival rate, their disease-free survival rate was significantly higher. And they noticed those that actually took iodine, that treated the tumors and exhibit less invasive potential, significantly increased the apoptosis, which is cell death, which you want to happen in cancer, and estrogen receptor expression and immune cell infiltration. So they noticed a lot of benefits, even if somebody's going down the more classical breast cancer surgery route and chemo route, that iodine was very beneficial to it. Iodine in cancer in animals holds true as well. So they looked at some mice and gave them iodine, and they noticed that the tumors became significantly smaller with iodine absorption, or basically the intake of iodine. Iodine deficiency can cause DNA damage and mutations. This is again going to be in the cancer side of it, but the nodular process is triggered by oxidative nature of thyroid hormone and synthesis and additional oxidative stress caused by iodine deficiency or smoking. So essentially what that's saying is that if you're deficient, you're going to have oxidative damage happening. Oxidative damage, as it shows on the second bullet point, causes DNA damage, mutagenesis. That basically just means mutations to happen. We don't want those to happen. And the big thing to take on is if you have thyroid nodules, that means that you've had a chronic iodine deficiency for many, many years. Typically, kids will get a little bit swollen neck if they're deficient, but typically adults, when they're chronically deficient, they will end up with nodules on their thyroid. Iodine increases intelligence. It's been noted to help with the metabolism. It's been noted to help with cognition, cognitive effects, increasing the IQ, even increasing the perceptual reasoning, especially in kids. So lots of good things. If you are a pregnant mom or wanting to have a kid, one of the most important supplements that I recommend is iodine. It does increase the baby's intelligence, and so many clinical stories about that. There was one doctor that had one of his patients already had 4 kids, and he was learning more about iodine. It's like, you got to give you're pregnant now, you just got pregnant with your 5th child, you need to take iodine. This kid's going to be so much smarter than the other ones. And of course, the mom got offended, like, all my kids are super smart, right? A couple years go by, and as the kid's growing up, she goes on to say, you're right. This 5th child, if you will, a lot higher IQ than even the previous kids. So there's definitely something to increasing intelligence with the iodine. So if you ever hear about, oh, this is just dumbing down the world or dumbing down the population, oftentimes they're actually referring to iodine deficiency and the whole increase of chlorine, fluorine, and bromine that's happening out there. But some of the symptoms of iodine deficiency, if you're wondering, dry mouth, inability to produce saliva in your salivary glands, dry skin, that's also linked with mitochondrial dysfunction, lack of sweating, so that skin thing can be in the mitochondria, but iodine's a very, very, very strong sign. Reduced alertness, lowered IQ, obviously going to be in the brain, just like memory problems. If you have nodules, scar tissue, pain, fibrosis, fibromyalgia, irregular or heavy periods, fatigue, muscle cramps, all signs of iodine deficiency. Fibromyalgia here, according to Dr. Fletches, one of the causes of fibromyalgia he's found is iodine deficiency. He believes that a person has to take iodine for 3 or 4 years to get rid of 50 to 80% of the scar tissue that is built up around their breast. So fibrocystic breast disease. So what is this telling you? This is a marathon nutrient. This isn't about taking it for a week and getting your levels up and you're fine. No, no, no. This is about taking this regularly and knowing it's more of the long term, not the short term. So we get into some iodine thyroid controversy. I see some questions have already been posted. I don't know how many I'll get to as I'm starting to already run out of time, but I'm sure most of them are involving this. Well, doc, I've been diagnosed with autoimmune thyroid or thyroiditis or Hashimoto's, and I heard you can't take iodine. What do we do? So there's 2 different camps typically that practitioners fall into and in the health world. Certain people say that you have to have iodine to heal an autoimmune thyroid case. And certain people say you can't have any iodine if you have an autoimmune thyroid case. If you're to put me in a classification, I'm going to tell you that you have to have iodine to heal your thyroid, and you have to have iodine to have a healthy body. You can't be allergic to iodine because every single cell of the body needs it. Thyroid gets a lot of attention for iodine, but so many other areas, skin, breast tissue, every cell of our body needs iodine. So to think that you need to decrease the iodine or minimize it or not supplement with it if you have a thyroid case, to me, it doesn't make sense. However, I'm not your practitioner, so always work with your practitioner, do your research, talk with your physician, especially if you're being prescribed meds and whatnot. But the thing I'll say is generally dosing with some minerals like selenium and helping your liver health will generally minimize the antibodies, the TPO, the TG antibodies that could be high on a blood work, of helping to minimize what they call a thyroid storm. So here's what's talked about. You take iodine and all of a sudden you bump up the antibodies, the TPO, the TGs when they're already high because you're autoimmune. That's the signal of autoimmune. Basically means its body's attacking itself, which the thing you have to understand about it, the reason somebody has autoimmune thyroid is not because they have too much iodine. It's because they have toxicity or infection, and you're going to need iodine. You're probably just going to need it in a lot smaller doses. So what you can do is help the liver. I'm a huge fan of TUDCA. I like to work on the liver at least 30 to 60 days, just like giving somebody some minerals that contain selenium. My favorite is the bioactive carbon minerals. That's why we love to dose that for 60 days along with helping to support the liver. Then when you introduce iodine, do it really slow. If you have any thyroid type conditions, just again, this is not a sprint, this is small amounts. And typically most people are fine. And I'll explain why that is, at least with the bioactive carbon iodine that we have. But just looking at thyroid hormones, you have T3, T4. T3 is the active. Thyroid majority makes T4, and it makes a small amount of T3. The T4 gets converted primarily in the liver. So the inactive thyroid hormone gets converted to the active thyroid hormone in the liver primarily. The gut microbiome plays a role with this too. But if you've heard of this, T3 just means that there's 3 iodine atoms on this hormone. T4 means there's 4 iodine atoms on this hormone. So as we look at thyroid hormones, it's iodine right in there. And I don't want to go through this picture too much, but just to show you that essentially iodide has to use the whole transport to get sucked in. and that is then oxidized and activated into iodine. Now, if you have iodine, it'll diffuse right in the cell. So that's where iodide and iodine combination is good. But then the body will go through the thyroid, specifically in the follicular or in the lumen of the follicle cell, will basically create the T3 and the T4. So again, the thyroid primarily makes most T4 with a little bit of T3, about 10%. And then in the half-life of T3, the active hormones, about 8 hours. The half-life of T4, the inactive, it's between 4 or 8 days. I'm blanking on that right now. But essentially, the thyroid makes the inactive. Most of it is then to get activated is converted in the liver. So those are kind of the take-home things to look at. Now, iodine gets talked about for thyroid, but it's needed for all kinds of stuff in the body. But this is what the thyroid.org has put together as far as research. I thought it was a good reference. So the prevalence and impact of thyroid disease. More than 12% of the US population will develop a thyroid condition during their lifetime. An estimated 20 million Americans have some form of thyroid disease. Up to 60% of those with thyroid disease are unaware of that condition. 60% unaware they have a thyroid condition or disease. And women are 5 to 8 times more likely than men to have thyroid problems. Sorry, ladies. So what's the source of the thyroid dysfunction? This is what you always want to think about. Infection, toxicity, and then of course, iodine deficiency is going to be part of that as well. And I already mentioned it, but the whole T4 to T3 conversion happens in the liver. The microbiome plays a role with that as well. But here's the takeaway. You can run your labs, look at your TSH and T4, and I'm going to tell you, if you run thyroid labs, you want to check free and total T4, T3, TSH. You want to check reverse T3. You want to check the antibodies, TG, TPO. You want to do a comprehensive check. But they've shown in literature that you can have iodine deficiency and still have normal thyroid levels of TSH and T4. So just because thyroid levels of TSH and T4 are normal doesn't mean that you're not iodine deficient. Most people are iodine deficient. This is why it's recommended to take it. So big picture, most health issues and challenges come down to infection and toxicity. And you might be saying, well, what about deficiency? You're talking about iodine. Most of the time, it's actually a toxicity that is causing the deficiency. So it's always good to be removing the toxicity, because typically that'll disappear the deficiency. In the iodine's case, because we're not getting it in our diet, iodine is something I recommend everybody to supplement with. And the more toxins you have, that really reduces the ability of iodine to absorb. So just to summarize some benefits of iodine: energy, toxin removal. It'll help actually remove radioactive elements, lead, mercury, especially from the thyroid. Protection from radioactive material. So if you're exposed to radioactive material, that'll actually help protect you. The iodine itself will. Anti-cancer agent, and then a whole cognitive development thing. So juvenile just means younger, but there's been so much research showing it's helping the brain, the IQ, the cognition, all that fun stuff. So how are you going to maximize the effectiveness of an iodine supplement? It's not hard to find supplements where it's got iodine and iodide, right? Dr. Lugol's in 1830s or whatever figured out the ratio, but there's a distinction. So some experts will say, well, you don't want iodine because it's just going to get converted to iodide in your gut. That is true. However, there is a clincher here that you see right on the slide. If we can protect the iodine and get it absorbed in the body, that's the golden ticket. So it doesn't get converted into iodide. This is why you want the right ratio. What we are using here at Microbe Formulas is we are using extracts of fulvic acid to bind on and protect the iodine so that it does not get broken down. We actually put it in a tablet form, which is really hard to do. That's why I'm not a big fan of the liquid. You know, liquid iodine will get tore apart in the stomach. But when you when you have the extracts of fulvic acid, it's actually protecting the iodine, so the iodine gets absorbed, doesn't get converted to iodide. Then you can get the diffusion of iodine into the cell. That's really the key thing to think about. And for those that are familiar with the roadmap to health, you'll know that phase 3 and phase 4 is where we introduce iodine. Why do we do that? Generally, iodine is great for everybody, but what if you have autoimmune thyroid? What if you have a thyroid type condition? We want to be on the safe side. Let's support the liver and the bile duct system, and let's get minerals the plant-based bioactive carbon minerals that contain selenium in there, so that if you do have that, it helps to more normalize the body, drive down the antibodies, so you're not going to cause an autoimmune storm. So that's where we're looking at really implementation of iodine. The bioactive carbon iodine, this is our product that we have. So we have it in the iodide to iodine, the Lugol's ratio, the 12.5 milligrams total. So it is 7.5 milligrams iodide and 5 milligrams iodine. The other 5 milligrams that's added to this tablet is the extracts of fulvic acid. This is what is helping to protect iodine and help to deliver it. This is one of the key things. And also the extracts of fulvic acid that are in this product are designed to help bind on to the halogens that the body doesn't need. So there's two pieces to the purpose of the fulvic acid. It's to protect the iodine so it doesn't get broken down in the gut. And it's also to help bind on to the halogens. So there's a major issue right now when people react to iodine. Typically it's because they have all kinds of other halogens in their body, chlorine, fluorine, bromine, and it's competing on the same receptors that iodine is supposed to be at. The fulvic acid that's in this product specifically, because every fulvic acid extract that we have in our products are different depending on what the purpose is. This is to bind on to the halogens. So it's helping to basically, let's say you have a receptor site and there's bromine and you got to get iodine on there. Well, if you grab onto it with an extract of fulvic acid and empty it off, now the iodine's got a place to go. That's why less reactions we've seen with this iodine than regular ones, because we're basically taking what's occupying where the iodine is supposed to be with the bad halogens. We're emptying that off so that the iodine's got somewhere to go. When the iodine doesn't have anywhere to go, that's when symptoms can come up. So as far as dosing, I recommend just starting with 1 tablet once daily. You don't need to take it with food. So if you're intermittent fasting, I like to do in the morning or late morning or early lunch or late lunch. I would recommend stay away from the evening, stay away from bedtime, because iodine causes brain alertness and it's going to be hard to fall asleep. So you don't want to be taking it before bed. Then you can work up to taking 1 tablet twice daily. So my preferred time is when you wake up in the morning, and then around lunch or after lunchtime, early afternoon. Those are the 2 good times generally to take the bioactive carbon iodine. Like I said, avoid taking it in the evening before bed. And if you're a sensitive or history of thyroid issues, or really just a sensitive person in general, you can actually break the tablet in half and just take a half a tablet once daily or once every other day. Start off slow. Or you can even break that half into a half and end up with a quarter tablet. Again, this is a marathon. This isn't about getting your iodine levels up to where they need to be tomorrow, because they've been deficient most likely for a long time, and it's going to take some time to really get them there. A common question that I shouldn't say common, I've had it a couple times, I just want to throw it in on this presentation, was if I get swollen or tender breasts when I start taking iodine, what do I do? What's the cause of it? Remember, iodine is helping support the immune system. The lymphatic system, which is very prevalent in the breast tissue, the lymph is very connected with the immune system. So there can be immune upregulation that happens that sometimes can cause that. Iodine is going to help to detox bad halogens out. It's going to help to detox radioactive elements like radium, cesium, uranium. It's going to help to detox heavy metals like mercury and lead. So you can be getting a detoxification effect. You can be getting an immune system activation effect. And it could just also be the cells are deficient of iodine. There's some turnover happening as well too. In any case, I always recommend just slow the dosage down. Slow the dosage down. You can do some lymphatic massage, really just try to move the fluids so things aren't stagnant. Saunas are good, heat pads, all that stuff is good. But generally, just think of iodine as you're dosing it for the long term. So, man, I'm gonna need a drink of water here. We're gonna do a giveaway. 2 lucky people. So while I was talking, our team picked 2 lucky winners that are listening live to the Iodine Masterclass, and you're each going to win 3 bottles of iodine. So each person's going to win 3 bottles of iodine. We've got, it's not showing up on my screen here. Must have to reshare. Give me a second here. And we will try this again. Here we go. It is Bill. Is it Ran Tannen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Nikki Castro. Congratulations, you each won a 3-bottle pack of iodine. So our team's going to reach out to you to ensure that you get your gift. And if you did not win your free bottle or free 3 bottles of iodine, which majority of people didn't because there's 2 winners here, you can, let's go back here. You can pick up 3+ bottles of iodine and get 20% off. So our team is going to put the link in there. It is get.microbeformulas.com/iodine. Chances are microbeformulas.com/iodine might get you there as well. But if we can get one of our team members to throw that in the chat, and they did, thank you, thank you. So you can just click on that, and if you want to get some iodine, the bioactive carbon iodine that I recommend, if you buy 3 bottles or more, you'll get 20% off. So I think a bottle is $30. So 3 bottles, $90, then you get 20% off of that. We're looking at about $18 off. So if you need to get anything else with this, let us know, or just put it in your cart. I hope that I answered most questions. If there's anything really quick in the chat that you have a question about, you can put it in there before I gotta get going here. I maybe got another minute or 2. I'm glad I made it through the slides. Thank you for hanging in there with me. There was so much research I poured over. There was stuff on iodine I did not cover about helping with dry eyes. Also helping with the health of the eye. Again, iodine is needed for every single cell. So I didn't get a chance to throw that in there. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that I forgot or didn't. Let's see. I should check tracking. If you have any issues or questions about your order or orders that you've placed, you can just email support. Support is amazing, and they'll get back to you. Otherwise, if you get a tracking number, you can just go to the USPS.com and put the tracking in yourself and see where it's at as well. Fantastic presentation. Thank you. Great information. Great job. Thank you, Doc. Let's see. Super great info. Thank you. Much appreciated. Is minerals required for iodine absorption? So iodine is a mineral. It is an essential mineral. You don't need other minerals to do that. So I don't recommend consuming iodine just from a multivitamin. It's not enough. You need a separate iodine supplement to get the healthy amount. Yeah, eyes and iodine. I just mentioned a couple of those pieces. Let's see. Many years ago, iodine saved my thyroid and overall health. Yeah, I think about my wife when she was pregnant with Leela and started having heart palpitations. We went in her 3rd trimester. She had an ultrasound done in her throat, and they found that she had nodules. And they're like, "Oh, you have autoimmune thyroid." Well, now I look at it, I'm like, dang, that was chronic iodine deficiency, and your body developed flipping nodules from that. Like, I didn't know that 8 years ago, but we know that now. So hopefully it's helping everybody else. Can the nodules go away? I believe the body can heal anything. It's most likely going to take time, though. And you have to look, if you have thyroid problems, what's the source? Diet, gluten is something. Infection, though, is a massive problem. Lyme disease has been linked with causing thyroid. Parasites, different viruses have been. Toxicity, heavy metals, radioactive elements, all that is linked with causing problems. So we always want to get to the source, get to the cause. It's all about getting to the cause. Can you please answer my question about TUDCA? I was told I need to stop taking it, and I was curious what you would say. I don't see the question, and I'm not going to have time to dig into that. You can email our customer service and ask, but I've been diving into TUDCA research lately, and dang, taking TUDCA mimics intermittent fasting on its effective cognitive function of the brain, meaning that if you're not intermittent fasting and you take a TUDCA in the morning, it's going to mimic your cognitive improvement that you would get from intermittent fasting. So I've yet to see anybody that shouldn't take TUDCA. And there's so much flipping research out on TUDCA. It is crazy. But I will say, I'm the one that brought this to the functional medicine, natural health world 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago. I can't remember now, maybe 4 years ago, because I saw benefits of it clinically. So I was popularizing that. So if people haven't heard of me or listened to talks or seen information that I've published, chances are they probably haven't heard of TUDCA. Now, there are some other people kind of copying and coming out with TUDCA or trying to, but so let's see. Can someone with chronic kidney disease supplement with iodine? If so, what dosage? Yeah, I haven't seen any issues. The key is making sure that the iodine is usable and absorbable by the body. The body will excrete anything it doesn't need. So I haven't seen any issues with chronic kidney disease and iodine. Lots of thank yous. Thank y'all for listening. Let's see. Would you recommend, does TUDCA increase the pH of the bile? If so, I have ulcerative colitis and was told to stop taking anything that increases the pH of the bile as it can irritate my colon. So the pH of the bile needs to be alkaline to neutralize stomach acid. Modifying the bile pH is not something I would personally look into, but this is something I'd probably do some more research on TUDCA and for your individual case. For me, if you were a friend or a family member, I would say it's not a big deal to have TUDCA with ulcerative colitis. There's so many benefits in research on TUDCA helping the body that I don't know. Just crazy. All right, I got to get running. I hope y'all have an amazing day. If you need anything, reach out to customer service. They do get bombarded typically after these live with the docs, so be a little patient with them. But our team is amazing. Before you have a question and go post, hey, I wonder where my tracking is, and you post it on Facebook, like just reach out to us and our team. Our team will help you. They'll take care of you. Much love. Everybody have an amazing rest of the day, and I will see you next week on the Live with the Docs, and Dr. Todd Watts should be back as well too. And I might even be able to get my wife to show up next week to share a little bit about her story. So wink, wink. I'll see y'all next week.